Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another live. As always, really excited to be here. And so as people hop onto the stream, love those warm and fuzzies, just the hellos. We'd love to know where you're also checking in from. We know we have an audience that spans the globe, which is really, really cool for us. So throw those comments up there. On these lives, we don't like to waste a ton of time. We'd like to dive right into the questions, but we're going to start foundationally where we always start, which is I want to just spend about 1 minute talking through the video yesterday. Okay, cool. Awesome. So thanks, Aspect D, for coming on and letting me know everybody's here and can see me. So let's recap, because Aspect D is talking a little bit about thanks, dude. Talking a little bit about the video yesterday. So let's go in and let's just spend just a moment talking about the video. I spent a lot of time on the script yesterday. That's pretty standard for us YouTubers. And then I decided to throw it out because the reality is that we go on YouTube, we Google items, and the missing piece of data is the human being on the other side of the interviews. We need to make sure that a specific part of our prep plan is making sure to get ready for a tougher interview. Because if you're not hiring a professional, maybe you're working with your significant other or a friend or a colleague, and they're really easy on you. They're sitting back, they're not really challenging you. And the reality is that we know we are going to face somebody tough in the interviews. And so what I really like, and I was actually talking with my wife about this to kind of bring it all together and tie it all home, which is, let's think about the party analogy in terms of the interview process. So what do I mean? If we were to walk into a party this weekend and we were to talk to 4 random individuals, what is the likelihood that those 4 individuals would be active listeners, really paying attention, would ask us good questions, would really be engaged? It's a very low percentage. Same thing with the interviews. We have to be ready for anything. And so when you prep and practice, I want you to ask the people to play just a little bit of a different character. Let's switch it up a little bit. We can practice all of our behavioral answers, all of our commonly asked question answers, all of our open-ended answers, and create those great structures and do all that stuff. And then it's all useless when we get Bob and we haven't prepped for a tough interviewer like Bob. And there's just not enough feedback on how to handle these scenarios and situations. So I know that that's a little bit of a tirade, but I just always like to recap on yesterday's video. If you have any questions about yesterday's video, obviously throw them in the comments. And then the last piece is we are here for everything. So of course, our primary goal is to get your questions answered. But secondarily, if you have any feedback from what's going on in the market, please share. Just say hello, give positive vibes. We're a positive platform, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking to create a community where we all help each other and help each other grow. Lastly, we do have a Slack channel. I typically cannot get to all the questions in the Slack channel, and so we use this default backup to make sure those questions are getting answered. Rely on the community to answer each other's questions. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, Aspect D, welcome back. So you've been getting the Jane and Bob type of interviews this past month. Do you think the technical roles will probably encounter these types of interviewers more versus non-technical roles? Sue is the best. Yes, I agree. I love Sue too. She is our cool interviewer always, but it actually doesn't matter. Technical or non-technical. Now, technical people can, if you lean technical can lean a little bit more analytical, which could lead to potentially a tougher interviewer. But the reality is that it just is based on their mood on that day. And then some people are classically just bad interviewers or tough interviewers, or they're not good active listeners. And so, of course, the last piece on this is we have to give feedback. It's just a pay it forward model. And we talk about this a lot. I know we talked about this last week too, is if you're not giving feedback, if you get a bad interview, an interview that gets cut short, a rude interviewer, you're just setting somebody else up to fail. So that's that kind of positive lens. Okay, let's talk through things. Okay, so let's go into this as a 5-part question. So you had 2 interviews for a solutions consultant role. one with the hiring manager that went well for GCA, and another Googliness and Leadership, which went fine. When I asked for a quick informal from the interviewer at the end of the interviewer, there was no direct answer, but suggested it was fine. But should I ask more questions and take breaks? Is this feedback positive or tilting towards negative feedback? When I was informed the same to my HR, she said it's fine and I have done good in the other interviews. So even if that one went fine, it's okay. Is this generally feedback that holds true? Okay, this is a really long, is this considered positive? Have my GCA and stakeholder management interview in the next 30 minutes. Oh, what kind of questions can I expect on stakeholder management and GCA together? Okay, so there's multiple questions in here, so let's cover them. The first question is, do we ask the interviewers for feedback on how the interview went? Not typically, not unless you're in a real heavy duty interview that's a closer role. So you're going into a sales role where you know you're going to have to do some difficult closing. Then we could say, hey, how was it? Like, it just, when it comes to sales, you're going to want a harder close. When it comes to anything else, the softer question, if we want to understand how we did, is there anything else I can explain or uncover that you do not feel like I clarified during this interview? So it acts as a catch-all question. It can be our first follow-up question. And then we're actually talking about anything that could be a trouble area. It could just be something where they didn't have enough information. In regards to trying to get all this feedback and controlling the process, so many questions that I get on LinkedIn or we see coming through Slack is like, it's trying to control stuff that we just can't control. So we got to do the best prep and practice we can. And then once the interviews happen, everything else in my comments and my feedback, it's just guesswork. I really don't know. I wasn't there and we can't say for sure. And the recruiters are really going to hedge towards not saying a lot. So we just need to sit back and be a little patient. And I know that that's really hard. Now, when it comes to stakeholder management, especially as we talk about a solutions consultant, again, where are we going here? It's collaborative. So with a solutions consultant, stakeholder management piece, you have to be collaborating across multiple parties. And so when it comes to specifically stakeholder management, we want to make sure that everybody's kept in the loop and we have a good cadence or methodology for how we keep people in touch and create that strong action plan. Now for GCA, for a solutions consultant, what we know about GCA is that it can really go all over the place. The 2021 model for GCA interviews is 2 open-ended and 1 behavioral, and one of the open-ended questions is random, and the other one is going to be more role specific. So just practice anything random. Look around the room, say, how would you build that? What would you do with that? That's a great way to see if you can bring it back to a more solutions consultant sort of mindset. And then the more role specific, it's probably going to be problem solving with technology and a collaborative lens or lean. I hope that helps. I know that was a lot of questions in there, and I hope I covered all of that. Okay. Can someone help me with GCA questions specifically tailored for solutions consultant and data analytics roles? Also, what to expect. Okay, I think we covered that question, but we'll just talk about data analytics GCA questions. Let's get away from the randomness because it's harder to predict, but for a data analytics role focused more on GCA that's going to be role related, it's going to be not only getting into the weeds of the analysis, but how do you utilize others to get that analysis? How do you share that information? And absolutely, when we talk about data, the other piece I want you to be thinking about is that execution phase. So we're executing, we're testing, and then we're presenting it. So often we're not doing a really good job of visualizing how we actually share the information in the end. So make sure if you get one of those questions that you're just going to focus in those areas. I hope that helps. And then I think, okay, yeah, from a randomness perspective, I do want to touch on this. For any data role or analytical role in a very random GCA question, it's such an easy pivot to make sure in the solutioning part that we're really, really focused in on the data and the numbers, because that is the core function of the role. Okay, lots of questions on GCA questions, so specifically tailored for a TAM. TAM, for anybody who's not aware, is a technical account manager role at Google. And so I think that I want to take a step back because we get so many questions on the GCA interviews, and it's like we could give you all the questions in the world, but it's not going to be super helpful. What is going to be helpful is talking about the foundation of how we answer these types of questions. So, how do we answer them? Strong clarifying questions, strong frameworks, and then the solution cannot be connected to the randomness of the question. What I mean is the randomness of the question is typically the critical point of failure. People and candidates and our clients get fixated on one singular item. And when you get fixated on one singular item that's really tied to the question, our GCA answers fall apart a little bit because we're not thinking about the solution as it correlates to the role. So I know that it seems like I'm kind of skating and not trying to answer the question, but the reality is that I'm not setting anybody up for success if I don't let you know about the foundational stuff that's really going to help. And it's when we get GCA questions, as long as we can bring it back to the role, we're going to have better success for two reasons. One, you're interviewing for that role for a reason. And then secondarily, it's an organizational item. It keeps us organized. It helps us stay on point. Now, for technical account managers, I want you to go ahead. I'll put this video in the YouTube description. Go ahead and look at that case study and use that case study that they're no longer using this year as the foundation for how to handle really tricky, complex questions. The last piece with the TAM, understand that sometimes your audience is going to be technical, sometimes it's not going to be technical. And that really works well for a lot of interviews, a lot of roles. Just be thinking about who are we speaking to. It's going to be really helpful. Hey, Stanley, you've watched a lot of videos, helped you get through peer and hiring manager interviews with Google. Amazing. And about to have a cross-functional interview soon. Can you please let me know what this would be about? What is Google looking for and how to better prepare for this one? Appreciate it. Okay, cool. So cross-functional. I mean, I think we want to go foundational, a word I use a lot, but when we think about the foundation of cross-functional interviews, it's all going to be about collaboration, teamwork, and don't forget how you utilize your domain expertise to help the people around you be better. So it's bringing all these items together, but yeah, it's really going to be about working with difficult people, maybe working with people who won't get back to you, collaborating for massive success, stretching outside the bounds of your role to really do something different, which is also going to yield and lean towards collaboration. All these aspects. If you want to come back and tell us a little bit more about the role, we could dive in a little bit deeper, but those are really the reality of these collaborative interviews. I saw a ton of them and they all look for the same thing. How do you work with others? It's going to be a basic foundation for success in these types of interviews. Okay, Tina, where are we at? Waiting on scheduling third interviews with two teams. Recruiter for one has asked for same day availability. So one didn't work out, but you're prepared, so you're ready to go and get it done. Should I always drop everything and say yes? Yeah, I think at this point, so everybody who's watching the stream, just so you're aware, Tina has been in the interview process for an associate business partner role since last July and gone through multiple iterations of the team match calls. It's a pretty unique scenario now that we're approaching a year, but it's a good place to be. But yeah, I would say at this point, just drop everything to get this done. You got to make this your focus, and as long as you can, nobody's going to think, oh, Tina dropped everything, she doesn't have anything else going on, or they're just not going to think like that. You just got to be super flexible because that's what you would do in the role. So continue to check in with us. I mean, every week it's just like we're hoping and praying that you're coming back to us and telling us that you got an offer, you accepted an offer. So continue to keep us updated. But yeah, drop everything if things come up. I hope that helps. Okay, just finished with a Google on-site interview and your videos, a question bank to prepare for L7 got downgraded to L6. What was challenging for me was remembering all the details. It's a lot to remember. Simpler you can make it, the better. In the end, I had 2 open-ended questions in my on-site. This was for a privacy policy role. Okay, wow, I'm really surprised that there were only 2 open-ended questions in the entire interview. That seems pretty unlikely, but yes, we need to simplify, and I think part of that simplification is going to be that cheat sheet, making sure that you go back to the foundational items continually that help us have success. And so those go-to clarifying questions, the go-to frameworks, really taking the time to think through our behavioral answers. But yeah, simplify, make it easier. Even on the behavioral side, for example, what's a good tip and trick to make it simpler? Think about your top 3 most complex projects, programs, initiatives, whatever they might be. Before you dive into the actions, just ask yourself a simple question. Where are the 2 or 3 or 4 areas where I contributed the most? And then that sets the stage for creating very simplistic actions. Of course, we're going to want to drill down. We're going to want to talk about the whole life cycle of the item that we're talking about. But we tend to overcomplicate things a little bit. And I hope that some of my strategies simplify it, because ultimately it's an organizational game. If we go in with the right structure and organization and we can add some critical details here or there, that's what success is going to look like. So continue to do those things, but I think that this is some good feedback. I think we always need to default to trying to make it easier. And the last piece of advice is, when you prep, compartmentalize your answers. So if we're working on an open-ended answer, maybe you're just going to work on clarifying questions one day, or you're just going to work on frameworks one day, or you're just going to work on go-to assumptions that you might make, or what are some of the critical areas where you could solution on a particular item. We're trying to do it all at once. And I think that all the coaching and feedback out there is trying to tell us to put all this stuff together. But if we break it into smaller pieces, we'll thematically notice some patterns, some trends, and it will make the overall prep process a little bit easier. I hope that helps. Okay, so you're wondering if you have a good resource for questions like, what doesn't excite you? What sort of team projects do you enjoy? Been focused on what I can and can't do, not on what I like or don't like. I'm trying to be honest, but show I'm flexible and adaptable. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go back to these. So what doesn't excite you? So this is a great question. So I think you want to talk about, all right, so what doesn't excite you? Well, of course you want to make that personalized a little bit, but what doesn't excite you is a lack of communication. What doesn't excite you is an inability to make things more efficient, because you really want to think and translate that sort of question into the ABP role. And so what are the things that are going to really remove your ability to have success in that position? Remove your ability to really be a good collaborator and partner for whoever you're supporting. So I do agree that you should be focusing on what you can do. There's no really can't do's. There's only just opportunities to learn. I want you to continue to show that flexibility, adaptability. But there's something going on in these conversations that's just, there is a little bit of a missing piece. And so, yeah, I think having just a slightly different lens, think about how you've answered all the questions so far and see if you can bring a little bit something different to the table. But I hope that helps. Let me know if I answered your question or not. I hope that I'm guiding you in the right direction. Okay. Completed all rounds. Screening on site for a Google TPM. I got good feedback all except for the technical round. Didn't get specific enough, not great in the tech part, but good in the program management part. Okay, this is pretty common. I have a strong background in PGM, including Agile certification, which was the main requirement of the job description. The recruiter said he will discuss with the hiring manager. Can you help me understand what would happen next? So yeah, I think I kind of mentioned this earlier. I can, but we don't really know. There's a few different paths. It could just be a no. There could be an opportunity to do another technical round. And then the other piece, and let's just see here. Now, the other piece is that they could downgrade this. So I guess this is a good question. So they could downgrade this from a TPM to a PGM. So sometimes they could just go to hiring committee and say, hey, this person isn't as technical as we needed them to be. So let's hire them as a program manager because they still have good domain expertise, program management expertise. And we would see downgrading from T to P. Now, what's the negative here? Well, program managers get paid a little less than technical program managers, but the vast majority of program managers, especially at a company like a Google, they grew up in Eng. So they are technical. It's just really hard to pass that T bar. So it could be a no, it could be another interview, or it could be a downgrade to a program manager. And based on that, they'll decide whether to move forward to HC or halt the process or do that additional interview. Hope that helps. Okay, what's our update? Got an update. The hiring manager has recommended to move forward. Present your packet to HC. You're waiting for an outcome. Is HC review weekly or bi-weekly? It's difficult to wait in the later stages. So HC for any technical kind of role should be weekly, sometimes meeting more than once a week. So I know you were doing coding, so I can't remember the specific role, and you can come back and tell me. But for like SWEs, there would be hiring committees like at least a few times a week, if not more, right? There's just so many SWEs that need to be hired. So typically you're not waiting that long. That's a data point that your recruiter should give you. If they say you're going to hiring committee, they should tell you when, or tell you at least an idea of when. So make sure to go back to them. But very happy that you're at this point and we're moving forward. The background story was full slate of interviews. We redid the coding interview, and now it's been like a month that we've been waiting for this feedback. So it's really, really great. And by the way, we love this. You can see people coming back into the stream and telling their story. So anybody who's joining this live or watching this live, come in, tell us your story. Let's work through it together. Let's help you get through this process. It's long, arduous, and sometimes it can be hard to be patient. So we're here to support you. First round for solutions consultant. Had 3 questions. 2 of them were open-ended and 1 was behavioral. I think the interview went good. I was able to answer the questions without much hesitation using CFAS approach, except for 1 question which was related to creating a testing phase plan before product launch. Oh, okay, well, that's a fun question. So 1 question related to a testing plan before a product launch. So, again, this is where we could let's talk through it. Like, this is where we could clearly go back and talk a bit more about the historical data. So testing plan, like before product launch, if it's before product launch, we're probably not testing it for the first time. So we want to understand, have we tested it once, twice, 10 times? What have maybe been the results of some of those tests? Who have we done the test with? Have we brought in enough of the product team, the Eng team? Is there anybody from legal who we need to bring into the conversation? And then as we create the framework, we really want to understand, are we testing for more of the technical side of things? So this is the technical side of product management. Are we testing for accessibility, availability, usability, scalability? What are those items that we're really going to test for? And we have to go back to that historical data to understand in our previous tests what has gone well and what has gone wrong. And then if we're thinking about a solutions consultant role, how are you not only driving the testing, but collaborating with the critical stakeholders? So that would be more on the solution component. That's a good fun question though, and one that would be pretty good to explore, but it's definitely obviously product leading. Yeah, absolutely. Continue to let us know about hiring committee. because we're all kind of waiting. Everybody who kind of pops into these lives, I think knows your story at this point and wants to know. So thank you. Okay, has anyone given BD, business development interviews for GCA and Googliness and Leadership? Any insights on how to prepare? Okay, so the Googliness and Leadership interview doesn't matter. The role is essentially unimportant. You're really not going to get role-specific questions. I mean, it could lean a little bit depending on your interviewer, but mostly it's going to be straight up. So there's nothing really different there. Positive lens, and then how did you handle the challenging problem areas as well? Flip both sides of the coin. Always be thinking about psychological safety, empathy, inclusivity, and really looking and feeling and talking through things with a positive intent. That's going to really shine well in those types of interviews. Now, GCA, kind of talked a lot about GCA interviews and trying to navigate and figure out what's going to be asked. For business development, it's really simple. In the solution of GCA answers, we are really going to put on our BD hat and solve with that lens, because that's what they want you to do. They want you to see how you take something random or even something that's role specific and get into the business development weeds of it. But we got to make a couple assumptions and really dive deep. I hope that helps. Can you clarify the 3C framework? Competition, customer, corporation. When would you use it? So for anybody who's watching, right, like the 3C framework, it's one of, if not the most famous consulting framework. It's very simplistic, very classic. This is typically used for something that's going to be client facing. It doesn't necessarily have to be client facing. I don't love this framework. It's not my favorite framework. There's a reason why I don't really use it or talk about these concepts. I mean, obviously, the last one I don't like as much, but obviously thinking about the competition and the customer, these are going to be huge. So anybody who's going into anything that's client facing, whether that's a TAM, a sales engineer, customer engineer, a couple of those concepts could be good concepts to think through. When it comes to frameworks, the number one item is just think about what are your go-to concepts that you get back to time and time and time again. And if you create 10 frameworks for yourself for all these random questions and scenarios, do you talk about goals and objectives all the time? Because if you do, then that's absolutely going to be part of your go-to framework. So I like the one that operates more in an operational space, and it's like your go-to. These are items that you know backwards and forwards and could talk about at any moment, and you could talk about any of the concepts. Then we niche down into more of a collaborative one. I just think that we have to have that collaborative lens and lean for today's job landscape. And then, of course, if you're going after any of the jobs at any of these tech companies, I want you to have some sort of overarching technical framework. This framework's okay. There's lots of classic frameworks out there that are consulting frameworks. Check them out. Maybe there are a couple data points in there that you love. And my clients are always mentioning ones that I've never heard of. And I'll go and I'll look at them and I'll say, oh, a couple of those data points are good. A couple of those other data points, I'm not attached to, but that's not the point. The goal of a framework is for you to have a strong attachment to those concepts. That's what's going to yield success. First interview for a program manager at Facebook, Privacy Operations Group. Interviewed at Google twice for BSA roles. Okay, so this is different. What similarities or differences can I expect in terms of interview style and questions? Yeah, so, historically from my own experience, I interviewed at Facebook, from my close friends who work there as recruiters, and just from the people I know who have worked there, Facebook, in comparison to Google, leans more behavioral. You are going to get more behavioral questions. It's a little less come after you, cutthroat types of interviews. It's going to feel, and again, this is based on the interviewers, you got to have cool interviewers, but it's going to feel a little calmer. just a little bit easier. It's going to have a little bit easier flow. When it comes to ultimately making the decisions for Facebook, it's the same. It's a really high bar. They're looking for something really specific, but I would say prep your behavioral answers a little bit more. You're definitely going to get open-ended questions, but it will lean behavioral. And then from a programmatic to BSA, like BSAs, any analyst is going to have to be heavily, heavily collaborative to understand the workings and the data. Obviously on program management, lean and wear the hat of the program manager, meaning you're rarely making individual solutions. You're making solutions as part of an overall team. So who are you going to collaborate with to have success? So when it comes to privacy and ops, like how are you collaborating with legal? How are you collaborating with maybe some of the content people or research people, et cetera, product people? So how do you bring all those people together to move items forward? I hope that helps. How would you go about answering this question for an Eng manager role? How do you determine when to award or ask for additional resources? What criteria do you use for making the call? This is one of my favorite questions. So when it comes to asking or awarding additional resources, this is a classic challenge for anybody in a management role. And that could be management, people management, or IC. This is actually an adapted question that I adapted from an Amazon question, which starts like this, and then it ends with, tell me about a time you did it. But when it comes to getting additional resources, one of the foundational areas we want to understand is, have we been able to do it with less resources in the past? What are those new items or events that have come up that has caused us to look for additional resources, and the creative lens of resourcing? So often we're saying, well, we're going to go borrow from Jane's team, or we're just going to put in the plug to leadership to get more resources. Well, could we implement a technology to get more out of our current resources? Sometimes in these major projects and initiatives, let's say we're working with a third party. Can we acquire that company? Could we acquire that company to get the 3 key engineers that they have so that they could work for us? I know that that seems like a stretch, but that's the level of creativity that they're looking for in these types of answers. I just love this question because we all know that resources are at a premium, and oftentimes the default item is to just throw more resources at something. But how do we squeeze more out of the current resources, and how do we get creative in that methodology? And again, it could be something like utilizing technology or tools to get better. I hope that helps. Okay, absolutely. You're applying for a global transportation program manager and about to have a cross-functional interview with a logistics manager. Let's see. We'd focus on parts that you would suggest. Okay, so, all right, let's go back to this initial question. So I actually worked on roles that were pretty close, like logistics program managers for data center supply chain. So global transportation program manager, cross-functional, this is all going to be about how you work across teams. I mean, when we talk about these types of roles, especially anything that's tied in with logistics, it's not only about internal stakeholders and internal groups, but obviously it's got this external vendor lean. How do we build great relationships with vendors? How do we stay on top of vendors, et cetera? So really be thinking, again, collaborative. I know I say it all the time, but there's a reason. And the reason is this is our default mode for most roles in 2021. We have to have that collaborative lens. So just don't forget to think across all potential teams that you might come in contact with. And then I want you to think a little bit on the behavioral side to think, okay, when have I had some unique challenges, some unique successes working collaboratively across teams? And that will set the foundation for your success. Good luck. Okay, My recruiter mentioned that the hiring manager wants one of her team members to talk to me for a phone interview. My discussion went well with her. I did not hear from them for a week. So you followed up with the recruiter, and he said that the hiring manager also wants to discuss with you formally and mention that the schedule and invite, and then it's been a week again, but he's not scheduled the discussion with the hiring manager yet. Should you follow up again with the recruiter? Yeah, so absolutely. In these cases, so it sounds like maybe the initial approach was that you wanted to talk to your team manager, talk for a phone interview. So again, even that cadence sounds a little weird. Maybe it was like going to be something that was not on the record and it wasn't going to be a real interview. Maybe it was just going to be more of a conversation, even though they called it a phone interview. So now that there's been a little back and forth, hey, you've waited a week. That's our default mode. If we've waited a week, we check in. We do never, ever want to wait more than a week. And even if they say, I'll get back to you after a week, it's just unreasonable to wait longer than that. So that's going to prompt that you check in, make sure that you're staying on top of it. So that would be my suggestion. I would reach out now. I hope that helps. Okay, Tina, did I answer your question? I've heard these types of what do you prefer questions going to be upcoming. So I've given it some thought. Reframing is key. Okay, so yeah, the what do you prefer question, you're really going to want to understand, like, again, the core function of an ABP, like what is the core function of the role? And then your preference leads and leans all towards the success that you're going to have in that position. So your preference is really what's best for the position. And of course you want to lean on what you like to do, but the collaborative lens, said it a million times in this live, but that's how I want you to focus. So your preference is going to lean towards what's going to be best in the position and what success looks like in the position. How would you answer this question and come across as real, genuine? Tell me about a time when you had an error in judgment in the last 2 years and what did you learn? Okay. Absolutely, like you are going to be real and genuine in these answers. The difference comes in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So in the beginning, it's all about reframing. It's like, tell me when you had an error in judgment. Okay, an opportunity for me to improve was error, negative, opportunity, positive. So we instantly changed the wording. You think that doesn't work, it absolutely does. It changes the whole tone of the rest of your answer. Then when we have these items, these are some of my favorite questions to talk about because the failure challenge, these areas where we kind of really fell down, they break the mold of the STAR method, meaning we want to get to the error or the challenge or the thing that happened fast. It really becomes just a slightly longer situation. Maybe we tell everything that happened in 60 seconds or less. Then our actions are really focused on the steps we took to improve that item, get better on that item. And then the heavy lean comes in the third part. So set the stage, say what happened, follow up with those actions of how you overcame it. And then learnings are going to be a good percentage of your answer, what you learned. And lastly, and the most missed step, and it's rarely asked for in questions, is an application of that learning, applied learnings. So we talk about what we learned and we say, and it was so amazing because in the next project, I took exactly that plan that I had come up with and implemented it. And I know that there were two key areas that if I hadn't created that new type of plan based on that opportunity I had to learn, that we would have fallen down in the same areas. So never ever miss the applied learnings. But so often in these answers, we spend a lot of time on the setup talking about the failure or error in judgment or whatever it might be. We want to get to that laser fast and then focus in all on those actions, learnings, and applied learnings. Okay, love that question. Okay, so coming back to this question. Okay, so I think I missed part of this. So you initially, and then when you shared your resume, should you share the same email or separately? Yeah, so I would just, okay, so separately and multiple other candidates, just go separately. Reach out to the recruiter specifically. I think that's your good next move. And then if the recruiter's non-responsive, you can reach out to the hiring manager. That's my recommendation. I hope that helps. Hey, Jeff, thank you for your impact. Okay, awesome. Thanks. Good to have you. Good to have you back. Good, and thanks for the positive feedback. We love the positive feedback here. Of course, we're here to answer questions, and that's what's going to keep you engaged and excited and sitting through these lives with us. But we love the warm and fuzzies too. Jeff and Eric, you have a telephonic technical interview this Friday for a BSA. Will this first interview only be on technical coding or open-ended questions, Googliness? So so we covered this question last week, and it's going to be really, really hard to do coding in a phone interview. The translation's super, super fuzzy, right? So I would expect technical questions, now not system design questions, but more straight up technical system questions. But I wouldn't expect coding. You could get open-ended questions, absolutely be prepared for behavioral or open-ended. And googliness, not so much in this first interview. Maybe one question that feels a little bit like googliness, but it's not going to be the default mode. Now, for technical questions, one great item to always focus in on with technical questions is we feel like, how does X work? And we just want to dive into how X works. But it's like, let's just take a step back on these technical questions. We don't have to go all the way through the CFAS method. Okay, how does X work? I just want to make sure that you want to look at it from Z perspective or Y perspective. What works best? And then maybe one other question. But just don't dive into the technical questions too much without a couple clarifying questions, because oftentimes we can really uncover the path that our interviewer wants to take, and it can be absolutely a huge positive impact on your success. So many technical questions, it's like we just dive in, but we live in a technical world where there's a lot of options. So it's just something to think through. I just want us to pause on technical questions and take a little more time. I hope that helps. Okay, thanks. And by the way, like one of the things with my energy, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm standing. Right. And so as you get into some of these interviews, obviously like the video interviews they're via video, it's going to be a little harder to stand. And I don't want you to face that physical fatigue of standing, because standing can just be a little bit tiring or draining for your brain. But in your phone interview, like get up, stand up, your voice projects a lot better. You have a lot more energy when you stand. So I always recommend doing the phone interviews standing. Now, of course, you're going to want to have your setup so you can have your cheat sheet. You can have everything you need to look at, but standing actually will provide more energy. Just something to think through. Okay, so sorry, we're finishing this question. I missed the back of this question. So for googliness, project management, and stakeholder management questions, yeah, BSA initial phone interviews are going to lean a little bit more technical. And then you will have stakeholder management, absolutely. BSA's got to be great at collaborating with others. So a little bit on the project management side, I would think definitely more of a lean on technical and stakeholder management. But obviously just be ready for anything. Okay, thanks for your feedback. Approaches and could see positive responses and nods during my interviews. Okay, awesome. Keep us updated. Remember, so critical that we're reading the body language of our interviewers. And if they're just doing like this and like shaking their head no, and again, we're facing Bob, our tricky interviewer, and they're kind of cutting us off and they're negative, we've got to read that body language and adapt and adjust. And so if they're smiling and nodding, keep doing what you're doing. That's always a good sign. The ups and downs, there's like this huge science and psychology with people nodding. Like if they're nodding yes, actually they will have a more positive reflection on you just by nodding yes. It's crazy the studies that they do that get people to just nod yes and just nod no, and the negative and positive lens of it. Don't believe me? Go do the research. It's crazy. Just nodding up and down instantly makes us feel better about people. So if you're getting those positive nods, keep doing what you're doing. And let us know. Come back and let us know the results, please. Testing plan before a product launch could be working with a team to create an integrated run book from the different teams developing the various services and doing a dry run. 100%. Yeah, I think that that's a great lens. And then let's see what else you have to say. And then working with QA to validate and provide a go or no go. Yeah, so I didn't even mention the QA team, right? Another critical team that you would collaborate with. There's so many paths you can take, but if we're going to test something, I just don't want to test it in this narrow silo. Let's test and let's bring in all the critical groups and collaborators so we can get as much of a perspective as possible. I think sometimes we think about testing and we get a very narrow lens, but testing is a big, big bucket, and we want to make sure we're bringing as many people into the mix if it makes sense, right? If it makes sense for that specific role, etc. Thanks. Okay, awesome, great to see you. I'm glad that you're still watching. I mean, I think that one of the comments and points is that hopefully part of what we're doing here in these lives and just the overall coaching is it's a constant reminder of how we work on our overall communication skills, how we adapt and adjust to others, how we deliver information. And I know for me, it's a constant evolution of learning. And you can see me bringing in a lot of the science and psychology behind some of my commentary. I read a lot. I try and learn a lot about these types of items to add value to the audience. And so, I massively consume books just to see how we can bring a different lens to this group. So thank you so much for the comment. Continue to show up, and I'll continue to do it. Okay. Any advice for a hiring manager interview at Expedia for a finance senior product manager role? Yeah, so I've actually never had an Expedia. Well, I had some client. It was either Expedia or Orbitz or one of those, but maybe it was Expedia. It would have been a long time ago. So, product management. Again, product management. So we're going to have product management with a finance lens. So we're always going to be thinking about it with the numbers. If we're leaning and casting a wide net, the vast majority of companies will lean behavioral. So let's believe that about Expedia, unless your research proves you different, but almost every single company is going to ask more behavioral questions than open-ended questions. So really work on those great examples. Then really think about the bucket of types of product questions you're going to get. So it's going to be product design, product strategy, analysis, especially for a finance role. There could be a little bit of this technical lean. If you were going in for a senior product manager role for a company like Expedia, I would definitely be prepared for an estimation question. The biggest thing I want to tell anybody who's going into product is hot. It's very, very hot. What does that mean? You should be really pushing for massive comp. The market is bearing massive comp, and my best guess is that some people in product roles are really underestimating the value of themselves. It's probably a good 50 to 100K more than you think it's going to be, because that's what these companies are paying now. There's been a huge jump in product salaries. Have that awareness and get after it, and I hope that helps. Yeah, I like that approach too. Okay. I have a phone interview for a general TPM Eng at Google. Any advice? The job description is super general. I know this TPM SWE job description at Google. I've had a ton of clients for this, and it gets really, really hard to narrow down. They cast a very wide net in these interviews. So When you go into this generic phone interview, just really think about your overarching technical skills. How will you bring those technical skills to the table in program management? And then the secondary piece is heavily leaning on your program slash project management skills. That's what it's going to be about. The technical side is going to be a complete wild card on these general interviews. I've seen it jump all over the place, and there's really no one set area because they're casting a wide net. On the technical side in these phone interviews, again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, just take a little bit more time on the technical types of questions and make sure you clarify. Even if it's not a straight open-ended question, if it's a technical question, just make sure you clarify, because that also translates to the program management side, where you're always going to be asking questions. I hope that helps. I know that's super high level. Okay, any advice on how to prepare for the senior executive round? Been through the on-site round, then scheduled a senior VP at Apple for finance lead at PMO. Okay, so when I think about speaking with leadership, especially maybe like a skip lead or 2 skip leads above, the first thing I want to do is I want to go in with positivity. And it's not that you wouldn't do that in any other interview, but they're not going to have a ton of interaction with you, most likely. So they want to know that you're going to contribute to the overall success of the team from a personality perspective. Then secondarily, it's how do you step up to the plate? That's almost the number one item I always think about with a skip lead or a skip lead is, how do you step up? How do you take responsibility for items? How do you remove things from leadership's plate to make things easier? The last piece of advice, less is more. Always with leadership, the higher levels we go up, we actually are going to start to condense our answers quite a bit. By quite a bit, I mean, I don't want a 50% reduction, but maybe a 20 or 30% reduction. Chop down on your time and then pause with lots of follow-up questions. See if you can drill down. When we ask follow-up questions, specificity is key. We have to specify what we want to talk about next. If we say, hey, what do you want to talk about next? Not a good question, right? So pick off of items that you talk through, see if you need to clarify a couple. I hope that helps, but those are my high-level suggestions. Okay. If your interview is scheduled for a DM strategist at Google, could you suggest me what kind of questions I should focus on? Also, you don't have much experience with AdWords. Okay, digital marketing specialist. So that's where I'm guessing that you have some expertise in this space. If you go to our app, and I'll have Eirik throw the app in the chat there, we should have some practice questions. If it's not digital marketing specialist, it should be for like a marketing specialist. But on the secondary piece, the AdWords piece, go to work. Go do your research, go learn it, because what's going to happen is when you're interviewing, you are going to be going up against competition who has used AdWords in their current digital marketing role, and they've made AdWords for a couple of years. So they really have a good idea of the ad space and how it works. So you just have to up your knowledge. So it makes it a little trickier when you're going in a specific product area, but it's really helpful, especially when you get to the solutioning side of things, to be able to talk about the product space from a knowledge area. So up your game there. Go into our app to see any practice questions. It's going to be across the board. All the things that you would expect in this type of role. And if you have any additional questions, let us know. Okay, you have your GCA questions on Friday. Any questions to prep? This is for a finance role. You're a TVC at Google for almost 2 years. Okay. What are the challenges that you know you're going to face in this position? That makes it a little bit easier on our predictable open-ended GCA question. But on the more random one, how can we tie it back to the financial component of whatever is asked of you? So we got to clarify, we got to come in with that good financial framework, tie it back to finances. Even if it seems like it's stretching, that's the place I want you to go. Because we don't really know what the question's going to be, but we do know that we can control that solution part. Now, for the type of finance role you're going after, really stay as close to that position as possible when you get to the solutioning. And that's what success is going to look like in any GCA answer. You should get one behavioral, two, really focus in on what you did well, and they're probably going to ask you what you would have improved and what you would have done different. If you get the question as a follow-up question to any behavioral example and they ask you what you would have done differently, always do stuff differently. Always have that lens with all your behavioral examples. I know that's high level, Ryan. I hope that helps, and good luck. I was a TVC at Google too. I was really fortunate to have a quick turnaround in my time there as a TVC, but I feel you. I know what it's like, and so go after it. When Google lists have an MBA and JD as preferred qualifications, does this basically mean this is required for any realistic chance? Nope, not at all. Remember, preferred qualifications, so often they're just going to throw MBA in there because they're like, MBA would be great to have. They don't really care. I didn't care. I never, ever looked at education or cared about education when I was trying to source or recruit people. It's not important. You could get a finicky or like high maintenance hiring manager who's like, I really want an MBA, but at the end of the day, MBAs are great. It's a great way to learn and bring some of that knowledge skill set, but it's just not a default. It's rarely going to be a deal breaker. Any recommendation on how much time you should use to answer an open-ended question? Typically, how many questions you expect the interviewer to go through in an interview? So open-ended answers, typically to restate the question and clarify, and depending on the back and forth with the interviewer, a minute to a minute and a half. Our frameworks are laser fast, 30 seconds. And then we get into that first solution, and the first solution should be about 2 minutes. So we're talking 4 to 5 minutes max for the initial part of our answer to an open-ended question. Then it depends. It depends on that transition at the end of our first solution. If our hiring manager or interviewer wants to talk more and go down that path with us, or if they say, hey, I'm great, and they want to move on. But typically the goal would be to probably have 2 to 3 solutions. So we're going to put more of your open-ended answers into that 10-minute time frame. That's the most likely, but we start with the baseline, 4 to 5 minutes to get through clarifying, framework, and that first solution with good assumptions. Now, typical amount of questions, it depends. It doesn't matter. There's no like catch-all that says like if we get asked 6 questions, it's better than 4 questions. But if you get Bob who's trying to speed you up, then you're going to be briefer and you're going to allow Bob to get to his agenda because clearly Bob wants to get to all his questions. Typically 4 to 7 questions. Hi, Jeff. As you're aware, I made it through the on-site, the PGM. Didn't get the original role you interviewed for, but you're in team match now. Whoa, recruiter claims to be too busy to match himself and wants you to identify teams. It's tough since it's all an external career portal. Any advice on this? Is this typical? Wow. Okay. Okay, so I'm probably going to throw some follow-up questions back to you. Do you have another point of contact? Because there's just no way for you to know what teams are doing team matches versus are not doing team matches. That's just data that you couldn't possibly have. Now, here's where you can help your recruiter. What you can do is you can source the external job postings, find a few that are a match, and send your recruiter the direct link with 3 or 4 or 5 bullets for why you're a good match. Do not ever send recruiters just links if you have this back and forth with them. But I'm pretty disappointed in this recruiter, and hopefully at the end of the process you can give some feedback on this, because if they just say they're too busy to find a team match for you, that's crazy. That's a terrible candidate experience, and I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. The only way you can overcome it is two facets. One, when you find these roles that you think are a good fit, get those bullets down. And then if you have another point of contact, utilize them. Because them saying that they're too busy, something's going on there. They don't see viability in you being matched with a team or something, but it's tough. Let me know if you have any other questions. Okay. You left your job back in, I don't know what happened to the number 1 here. I only have a number, oh, here's the number 1. You had your interviews. Oh, okay, sorry. We answered that question. Okay, let's go back to number 2. So you left your job back in 2020 and co-founded your company with a couple of friends, which we started as freelancers first and formed it as a company to take advantage of COVID-19. And if the recruiter or hiring manager asked me that since your company is doing well, why do you want to still apply to Google? How should I answer this? Well, you could say, look, my organization is doing well, and this opportunity came my way, and I want to be open-minded. I want to give this opportunity a chance because Google is a company that obviously has a strong brand, culture, reputation, and I'm intrigued. I can't guarantee that this is the perfect path, but I can guarantee that if we have great dialogue and see it's a great fit, this is an opportunity that I would explore and be interested in moving forward with. So you want to really have that honest dialogue with them. I would throw the question right back to you. What is it about the Google opportunity? Is it money? Is it brand? Like, why would you step away from something that's going well? Because here's the thing. Whenever we take these corporate jobs, the one thing we do give up is, well, we give up a couple things. We give up freedom, but we also give up the ability to predict our leadership, which is something you cannot control. And so when you go into these big companies, yeah, Google's a great company, but you can't predict that you'll get a great lead. So you are taking a little bit of risk. Now, there's a lot of stability in the income, and obviously the brand is great. So lots to think about. I hope that helps. What can you do to get your profile resume by a recruiter without being referred? So the resume, it's a little tough because when we're applying, we end up in a large bucket of people. On the resume side, go to our website, download the resume template. The only thing that matters on the resume is that it's clean, organized, and simple. There's so much noise in so many people's resumes. Create a simplistic bulleted summary, and that bulleted summary is different for every role. It's different. You're highlighting the key responsibilities about the job, qualifications in that summary, the ones you have that correlate directly with that role. So you will create a new resume every time, but just change up the summary piece. And then the second piece is LinkedIn. We've got to make sure our LinkedIn profiles are amazingly smiling picture. Number 1, and then we put our resume bullets into our LinkedIn profile. Why? It's a keyword search game. So make sure you're being found by keywords. I hope that helps. Jeff, what are some follow-up questions that I could be asked by the interviewer after having answered a behavioral question? Yeah, the number 1 question that I see is a probe on a detail or two. So maybe they want a little additional context. Maybe and then the other one that I see the most is, what would you have done differently? I was asked that question in my Google GCA interview as a follow-up to the behavioral question. It's the first question I was asked. Went through this huge, long project that I was a part of. And then the first question from the interviewer was, what would you have done differently? My answer was everything. And so it was just a complete acknowledgement of all the areas where I could have improved. And we talked through them. We talked through every area where I I looked at it with a different lens and thought about what I could have done differently. So that's the number one question I want you to anticipate. What would you have done differently? And in all your major projects, programs, initiatives, have that thing. Have those two things. Have those three things. It's going to be massively helpful. But those are really the only two areas. They want to drill down into one area more, or they want to know the difference or like what you would have changed. I hope that helps. What's the best way to ask for a referral at top tech companies? Can I directly contact a recruiter on LinkedIn and tell her about my profile for an interested role? Nope. I mean, you can, but this strategy classically doesn't work. You cannot ask for a referral of somebody you don't know. You won't get in the door that way. And reaching out to people, especially recruiters, and saying, hey, I'm a fit for this role, check out my profile, the likelihood of you getting a response is well under 1%, because that's how 99% of people reach out to recruiters who work at these premier tech companies. They say, here's my background, find me a job, or here's a role I'm interested, help me. And it's too much. I got about 100 of those a week. So I think that that's the piece that maybe we just want to talk about for a second, is it's just taking a moment to understand that you are not the only person that's reaching out to them. And again, I want to take a positive lens on this. We got to look at it that way. So you know what's coming next, or some people here know what's coming next. Change the pattern and style. Reach out to recruiters with a cool article or a cool video that might help them in their job. Start responding and answering to recruiters' activity on LinkedIn. Don't ask for anything. You got to do that pay it forward model, and eventually over time, hopefully it comes back. But if you're just reaching out to recruiters with roles you're interested in or your profile, it's not going to yield a lot of success. It's just going to be a waste of time. So just try the giving model and see if that does anything. I hope that helps. Okay. 1 hour and 7 minutes in, we're doing our poll question. So we're going to start doing these in the lives. We're just going to throw something random in that I'm not ready for. Okay, what is the biggest key learning you made regarding an interview? Comment below. Hey, so if you want to throw this in the comments below, we'd love to see if we can get some comments. And I'm going to answer some other questions. I know Eric wants me to take a minute to see if comments come in, but if there is a key learning, we love this live from a community perspective. We've got a lot of people in this live right now, and so if there is a key learning, throw it in there. We'd love to hear from you. We want to help everybody improve, and obviously I want to continue to learn and grow and see how I can help people. So there's my pause, Eric, and we'll continue to answer questions, but please follow up, and then we'll also throw this in the YouTube comment section to this live as well. Okay. You have another GCA interview. Any thoughts or tips? Yeah, so we've really heavily leaned on GCA interviews today. The number one piece of advice when you get to the solution, don't go away from the role. Stay position specific. It's the key to success. Remember, stay structured and organized, still clarify, still come in with the framework. Position specific in the solution is what it's all about. And if you can't do that, that's going to be a critical point of failure. If you can do it, usually it yields success. Does Google recruit international MBA candidates? What must one do to get into Google post MBA if the school is not on the West Coast? Yeah, I mean, they do recruit international MBA candidates, but they do more recruitment more locally, because obviously sponsorship can be really tricky. So you might want to just start to build your network and start connecting with people who are more local. And then, yeah, on the West Coast, no, Google doesn't really, there's not a strong preference lean for schools for Google. Not that I've seen, at least. Of course, there are the elite programs of the world, and are there a lot of people coming into the Bay from Stanford and Berkeley? Absolutely, of course there are. But I think that the likelihood of recruitment is probably lower, but there's definitely an opportunity for you to network. So that's something I would recommend. I know that that's pretty high level. I hope that helps. Okay, so follow-up GCA was requested from hiring committee, not uncommon. So take the learnings from the last interview and apply them. Think about the questions you were asked. Think about your struggle areas and utilize that to your success. Anytime hiring committee asks you to redo an interview, gotta crush it. You gotta crush it. There's no lean hires. It's gotta be a hire or a strong hire to even be considered. You gotta really show that that first interviewer missed something with you and that you're great. So it's just gonna take some serious prep and practice. Good luck. For a recruiter role, who would be part of the cross-functional interview? So cross-functional could be somebody who's potentially a program manager. So they're doing more on the programmatic HR side of things. They could just be from HR in general, maybe like even like an HR VP. They could be a product area staffing lead. So somebody who's not in a recruiter position, but in a staffing leadership position. So it could come from a lot of different areas. Really have that project and collaborative lens. How do you work well with others to get things done? I hope that helps. The final interview for an account manager for an AM role, RRK, GCA, and Googliness and Leadership includes specific questions on Google Ads, like in the previous phone interview. Maybe if you're going into an AM role, yeah, because I guess most AM roles are going to be a little bit, well, a lot of AM roles will be ads focused. So yeah, I would expect it, especially in the RRK. And then in the GCA question, you're probably going to get one that's pretty close to that. Googliness and Leadership, it's straight up. There's not a lot of changes role to role. You're welcome. Okay, hi as well. Okay, Ryan, I'm glad that was helpful. I know it was relatively high level, but good luck. Let it come back and let us know how it goes. How much time should you spend in your introduction and speak more of work directly related to my job? I don't like long introductions, 60 seconds or less. Anything over 60 seconds, you are taking time away from yourself. Introductions, tell me about yourself. Why Google? They're softball questions. They're really intended to just warm it up, get that time back, 60 seconds or less. Talk more about your skills and how they correlate to the role and organization, less about a methodical walkthrough of your background. A lot of coaching on tell me about yourself is starting with your school and roll. Total waste of time. You got 60 seconds, get into the weeds of the interview. What we care about is really following their agenda. This is just to warm us up. And at the end of the process, regardless of the company, they don't care about those answers. They care about the answers to the other tougher questions. So the hiring committee asked for another GCA interview. Will this reduce your success rate? If successful, can I leverage this to negotiate a higher salary? It will. Your likelihood of success is less. And again, I just want to talk from a statistics perspective, just because you have to, at a minimum, get a higher or strong higher rating. So it's tougher. This is not a leverage point. Redoing an interview and doing well in that interview doesn't work as a leverage point. Will the interviewer or like overall be biased if you get through it because you had to repeat an interview? No. So that's the good news. You're going to crush this interview. You're going to get the offer, but it's not going to weigh positively or negatively. It'll be the same. You get approved at that level for that role, and then you just need to negotiate strongly, set that anchor high. But it doesn't fall one way or the other. Once you're into that approval process, it's all the same. You're just negotiating like any other candidate. I hope that helps. Yes, totally varies. It totally varies. It varies on your interviewer. It varies on you. If we're looking at a 45-minute interview, usually on the open end, each question, like if we're going to do 3 questions, each question is going to be 15 minutes. Now, one question answer might be 20 minutes. It's not on you to talk for 20 minutes. You're likely going to get through the first 5 to 10 minutes of going through multiple solutions, and then they're going to trigger some of those follow-up questions. So for casting a wide net, 3 questions, 15 minutes for each, but one could go up to 20, one could go down to 10. It's more likely that the behavioral answer will be a little bit shorter. I hope that helps. You had a hunch your recruiter is being lazy, although supposedly my feedback was unanimous that I'm a good fit for Google. I've been sending links with bullets. Thanks. Okay, Ferris. And your other point of contact is somebody who you referred you. Yeah, I mean, again, we always want to go with the lens of positive intent, but yeah, it sounds like you don't have a very supportive recruiter who's trying very hard for you. So you just got to continue to push, stay in contact, send more roles, send more roles, send more roles, poke, 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 and do it in a friendly and gracious manner. And that's all you can really do. And then lean on your friend to see if they can help in any way. You got rejected by Google. Will you have a chance in the future to apply and interview at Google again? Yep, most people are getting at least a few chances. If the interview feedback comes through a few times and it's continually not very strong, that's when they're probably going to stop giving you a chance. There's no set number, but usually after a few really good chances, that's when they'll start to back away a little bit. That's typically what I saw, but there is no set number. Why do some recruiters ghost you after the initial call, which went well? Does that mean that they found another match? Is it good to keep following up for the next 2 weeks? Yeah. Keep following up. Yeah, recruiters ghost you all the time. I've been ghosted by recruiters in my career. Interviewed, filling out like massive surveys to see if I was a fit. Been ghosted all the time. It's just it's a lack of a skill. It's a lack of an organizational skill. And I'm sorry when that happens. It's the worst. But keep trying for a while, and eventually you just got to move on. Yes, interview practice is not an option. Look, for the vast majority of us, we can't wing it. There is a percentage of the population that can wing it. It's a few percent, 3%, 5% that just can go in and they're great in interviews. For most of us normal human beings, it's a lot tougher. So, my strongest recommendation is practice. It can be with a professional, a friend, a colleague, a significant other. But you just have to speak it out loud. And you have to get some feedback from somebody. Now, it's okay. Like, we have that recording tool in our app. I definitely recommend that you use it. But getting some live feedback can be really helpful as well. Thanks. Okay. Cross-functional interview. Okay, so I think as we mentioned that this was for a finance role, correct? So for a finance role, cross-functional, just start to think about who are like the critical stakeholders that you are collaborating with often in a finance role, and how you build and foster those strong relationships. And that could be a lot of different things, right? That could be from legal to compliance to analysts, etc. We could really cast a wide net. Just think about your overall skill set and how you collaborate and work with others. Again, I know that that's super high level, but I hope that helps. Oh my goodness. Okay. Any advice for interviewing at Pokemon for TPM? Okay. Not any different than I would give for any other TPM role. Have that technical lens, have that programmatic lens, and do your research. I don't know anything about how they interview, but if we're casting a wide net, as I've mentioned before, most companies, the vast majority of companies, lean behavioral. It's just the default mode. I want you to be prepared for anything, but that's the best advice I can give you because I'm not really familiar. Do that research and see thematically what are the types of questions they ask. But Glassdoor is decent. I put a LinkedIn comment out there. You have to be discerning, right? You have to say, okay, this is just a fluff somebody threw this in there, or this is a basic question, or it doesn't matter. But there are some questions where you're going to look at it, you're going to say, whoa, that sounds like a likely question. Even if they didn't get the wording perfect, just use it as a practice question. It will always be helpful. So while I don't love Glassdoor, I don't hate it either. There's some good resources there, and if we do our research, we can typically pull out some questions that would be really helpful for us to practice. I hope that helps. Okay, great to see you get startup after quitting Google. What were the positives and negatives that you faced starting up coming from the Google brand? Well, I think we all know that the Google brand has been pretty good to me. Of course, there's always this item, and part of this audience is being really real and genuine. There's a part of me that feels very attached to Google and doesn't want to be so attached to Google. But I got really lucky in the fact that I can talk about Google and I can provide a lot of guidance into an organization that a lot of people want to get into. I face all the challenges that any startup faces: staying organized, staying on point, not working 70 or 80 hours a week, which is pretty much the norm anyway. And just staying really positive, and there are difficult parts of it, and there are parts of it that I absolutely love. But the biggest thing, if anybody's considering working for themselves or doing a startup, is it takes some patience, and things just don't typically happen as quickly as we want. So for instance, YouTube. For the first year that I did YouTube, nobody watched. I did it for a year, and literally it took a year to get 1,000 subscribers. Nobody watched my content. Nobody cared. And the big item that I want to impart on anybody, if you're going to do anything in life well, is the compound effect. And so I just kept doing it. And that was really hard at first. And then eventually one of my videos got watched, the program manager video, and then videos started to pop from there. Great question. I know I went on a tirade there, but I really encourage anybody who's looking to start their business that you should do it. It's really fun. It's a lot of hard work, but it's fun. Tips for calming your nerves. You have your interview scheduled after a phone screen for an ad TPM4. Would you say the success ratio is for people to go to the on-site interview stage? Yeah, so I would say that from the first interview to the on-site stage, it's not half, it's less than half. But it's still a decently high percentage. They still want to give people the benefit of the doubt. For calming your nerves, it's all about taking deep breaths, really resetting. And then one of the big keys is, of course, we want to talk about meditation, doing all that positive stuff. But what I really want you to think about too is, what are we doing the hour before the interview? Do not schedule meetings, work, anything. Shut down for an hour before. It's not advice that I did for myself in my past career, but your brain has finite periods of time where it can really function at a high level. So make sure we shut down for at least an hour before the interview. Just something really relaxing, a walk, meditation. We're not really making our brain work, and then we can get into the interview and be more relaxed, but always go back to your breath. I hope that helps. Thank you. Okay, legend. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Will there be a technical round PM role in hardware engineering? Yeah, there should be. I would just ask your recruiter to tell you more of what they want to focus in on. But for hardware engineering, there's usually a technical interview that is hardware focused. Is it bad to change your desired compensation after clearing all the rounds? Just remember, you set the anchor. So they're going to be pretty stuck on that anchor. It's impossible to change the anchor that you've set. It's already happened in the past. We can't change it. We can ask for more, but we're going to want to provide data. Why? If you don't have that data, it's going to be more challenging. This is the power of the anchor. If we set it high in the beginning, it usually plays in our favor. But yeah, it's hard to change it once it's been set. Okay, so what technologies are used in the hardware engineering department? I mean, that's a big question. So I can't really tell you. I'm not really sure. I never worked with like hardware eng. I do know that if you're looking at any sort of hardware engineering role, there's definitely going to be that vendor component. So that third party component is something you want to be thinking about. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, I just don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, meditate, use the Headspace app or YouTube. You also created an interview day routine. You set alarms for particular times. Each time, this helps so much. Thank you, Tina. And then you also, Spotify has some good get pumped up interviews playlists. Yeah, so does YouTube. YouTube has some crazy motivational playlists that will just really get you pumped up. But you know, YouTube, I do a lot of guided meditations on YouTube as well. So it's a great thing. Now, of course, if you're going to do guided meditations on YouTube, probably want a premium account because you don't want to be in the middle of a meditation and get a YouTube ad. So something to consider. Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Stacy. Good luck with Pokemon. That should be pretty fun. Okay. Okay, so I want you to go right back into the Slack group. Go into our Slack group and see if anybody wants to practice system design with you, because system design is tricky. Remember to really heavily front load on system design. Ask great questions, right? Let's clarify, then let's come in with the high level design. Then let's chop through portion by portion. Let's drill down a little bit, and then at the end, sanity check it, make sure it makes all the sense in the world, right? These are some of the critical items. But go into our Slack group because we're looking at creating a platform where people can practice with each other. But go ahead and jump in there and ask somebody if they want to do it with you. Okay, product manager role at Expedia. You mentioned this role is hot right now. I don't have product management experience. They reached out saying if you were willing to learn, they would teach you, making them good people without experience. Does this change the way I prepare? No, I mean, I think you really need to go in and you need to understand what are the core functions of a product manager and what they do. But in terms of like a value and a price point, yeah, it might impact how you negotiate a little bit, but just learn the product landscape. It's a tricky, tough landscape, but if they're willing to teach you, that's fantastic. But yeah, you might not be able to drive that price point up quite as much if you're going to be in learning. Okay, one more question. What do you think of Google Professional PM Certificate for Program Manager? Examples and mock questions that recruiters shared are quite a match with the course. Yes. To any training, learning, development, the answer is always yes. The question is more a question of time. Do you have time to do it before the interviews? Does it make sense in that way? Because for like a few days before, a week before, I would say focus more on your interview skill set. If you have more time, always coursework and learning. Okay, this is a good stopping point. The second week in a row that we've really hit that hour-and-a-half mark, which is really good to get to all the questions. If you guys have any other questions, please let us know in the Slack group. I'm gonna throw these couple last ones up there, but we're gonna stop at an hour-and-a-half. GCA questions, agency account strategist, go into our app. We have a ton of questions in there. The ones that are more random and open-ended will be great. And then, sorry, I just want to cover this one. HR has told me that the next round can be anything. Yeah, so some roles, they'll go in any order. Just something to be aware of. Ask your coordinator if there was something that I need to. Your coordinator's not going to be able to answer that question. So you do want to ask. It can come in any order, but they should tell you which interview is coming up just so you can prepare appropriately. So once it's scheduled, it's okay to ask what interview it is. Okay, everyone, I hope that helps. I'd like to get to and answer all the questions. So I hope that you found today helpful. Definitely join our Slack group. Check out our free desktop app. And we got all sorts of services on practiceinterviews.com. And if you like our overall content, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much, everybody.